What if the person who holds the key to your freedom is also the one who locked you away? Stay with me until the end, because this isn't just a love story. It's a journey of choice, sacrifice, and a heart learning to trust again. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let's begin. They say every bride remembers the smell of her wedding day. Some recall roses or lavender, maybe the sweet scent of cake frosting or champagne. I remember cedar and old wood, sharp, dry, almost bitter, like the walls of the church were holding their breath right along with me. I stood there, clutching a bouquet of ivory roses I hadn't chosen, my knuckles pale against the satin wrap. The chapel, tucked away on the farthest edge of upstate New York, was dimly lit by aged sconces. Dust floated through the air like tiny ghosts under the flickering light. My heart pounded, not with excitement, but with the kind of dread that sits heavy in your bones. There was no music, no laughter, no family filling the pews, only me and him, Dominic Hayes. He stood tall at the altar, framed by the soft glow of the stained glass window, but he might as well have been a statue. His face unreadable, carved in cold marble, sharp jawline, broad, shoulders, dark suit pressed to perfection. He didn't look at me, not even once, as if I wasn't even real, a possession, a transaction sealed in silence. My lips trembled as I tried to breathe. My fingers toyed nervously with the silver ring on my other hand, the only thing that felt truly mine. It was old, worn, shaped like a tiny vine curling around itself. My mother's ring. She used to wear it when she baked bread on Sunday mornings, humming softly in the kitchen as the scent of cinnamon and vanilla filled our tiny house. I used to watch her hands knead the dough, steady and sure, as if they carried all the strength I didn't know how to hold. Now, those hands were gone. She was gone. And here I was, standing in a dress that felt more like a prison than silk. The priest's voice echoed, muffled and distant. "Do you, Lila Nguyen, take Dominic Hayes?" My throat tightened. I glanced to the side, half expecting to see my father, to feel the weight of his steady gaze giving me courage. But he wasn't there. He hadn't dared come. The shame was too much for him to bear, I suppose. Or maybe he couldn't face what he'd done, offering me as payment for the debts he couldn't repay. I swallowed hard. My vision blurred as I fought back the sting behind my eyes. My mother would have told me to hold my head high, to remember who I was. "Honor is what you choose when no one's watching," she used to say. But Dominic, he was watching now. Or maybe he wasn't. His gaze remained fixed on the floor, as if the very sight of me might disgust him. I heard the priest clear his throat again. "I do," I whispered, barely breathing the words. A single breath, a single surrender. And just like that, it was done. No kiss, no applause. Just the hollow sound of the priest's final blessing echoing through the empty chapel. I dared to glance up, searching his face for something, anything. But Dominic turned away before I could find it. He didn't offer his arm. He didn't even meet my eyes. And yet, I followed him. What else could I do? The sleek black car waited outside, engine idling softly in the crisp night air. I climbed in without a word, the weight of my gown pooling around my legs like chains. Dominic slid in beside me, silent as ever, staring out the window as the driver pulled away from the chapel, leaving my life, my past, in the rearview mirror. I pressed my forehead to the cool glass, blinking hard to stop the tears from falling. My hand slipped into the pocket of my dress, fingers curling around a small folded piece of paper. My heart clenched as I carefully opened it, smoothing the creases like a fragile treasure. It was her handwriting, elegant, steady, so painfully familiar. If you ever find yourself standing at the edge, where every path feels like a trap, let love be the risk you take, Lila. Because sometimes love begins where fear lives. I bit my lip hard, forcing back a sob. Love. What a cruel word tonight. I refolded the letter, pressing it to my chest, and leaned back in the seat. Dominic shifted slightly, his hand clenching into a fist on his knee. For the briefest moment, I thought I heard him exhale. A sound that almost resembled regret. Almost. I didn't dare turn to look. The plane was waiting when we arrived at the private airstrip. A sleek silver jet stood under the floodlights, engines already humming like it had been waiting for this moment far longer than I had. Dominic stepped out first, giving no glance back as I followed on trembling legs. The cabin smelled of leather and coffee, cool and sterile. I sank into the seat by the window, clutching my mother's letter so tightly my knuckles burned. He sat across from me, silent, cold, unreadable. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to beg him to tell me what came next. But the words tangled in my throat, too fragile to break free. As the engines roared to life and the plane lifted off into the dark, I pressed my forehead to the window once more. Below, the city lights faded into nothing but shadows, and I knew, without a doubt, that whatever waited on the other side of this flight, there would be no way out. I don't remember falling asleep, but when I opened my eyes, the world outside, the window had turned from black to silver. Moonlight spilled across the clouds like ripples on still water. For a moment, I thought we were still somewhere above the city. Then I saw it. An island. Small. Distant. Swallowed by darkness, except for a single row of glowing lights tracing the shoreline like a trail of tiny lanterns. My breath hitched as I leaned closer to the window, my heart pounding louder with every inch the plane descended. He hadn't told me where we were going. He hadn't told me anything. I glanced at Dominic across the cabin. He was still there, sitting, as still as he had hours ago, staring into nothing. His jacket was unbuttoned now, his tie slightly loosened, but the tension in his jaw hadn't eased. Not once. The tires kissed the ground with a soft thud, and the engines began to wind down. A shiver rippled through me as I sat frozen, clutching the armrest, waiting for him to say something. He didn't. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and without a word, motioned for me to follow. I did. The night air hit me like a wall when I stepped off the plane. It smelled of salt and pine, sharp and clean. A black SUV waited at the edge of the narrow runway. Dominic climbed in first, leaving the door open behind him. I hesitated, glancing back toward the jet, tempted to run, to ask the pilot to take me anywhere else. But the crew had already disappeared into the shadows, like they knew better than to interfere. I climbed in. The driver pulled away, the tires crunching over gravel as we wound down a narrow road flanked by towering pines. I pressed my hand to the window, searching for signs of life. Houses, people, anything. But there was nothing. Just trees. Endless, silent trees. We rounded a curve, and that's when I saw it. The house. No, not a house. A fortress. It rose at the edge of a cliff, walls of glass and stone gleaming under the moonlight. Massive windows stretched from floor to ceiling, reflecting the ocean below like a black mirror. Every light inside glowed warm and golden, but somehow it still felt cold, untouchable. Like him. The SUV stopped at the front steps. Dominic stepped out first. He didn't look back to check if I was following, but I did. I trailed behind him like a shadow as he pushed open the heavy double doors, revealing an interior so pristine it barely looked lived in. Everything was white and silver, clean lines and sharp edges. Not a single thing felt soft. Not a single thing felt like home. Dominic stopped in the center of the foyer, his back to me. He ran a hand through his hair, his shoulders rising and falling with a slow, almost reluctant breath. "Your room is upstairs," he said at last, his voice low, distant. "Second door on the left." That was it. No welcome. No explanation. Just instructions. I stood frozen, clutching my hands to my chest. "Is this where I'm supposed to thank you for ruining my life?" I whispered, surprising myself with the sharpness in my voice. He stiffened but didn't turn around. "I never asked for your thanks," he replied quietly. "And I don't need it." Tears burned the backs of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Without another word, I turned toward the staircase and climbed slowly, each step heavier than the last. I reached the second door, pushing it open with trembling hands. The room was beautiful, luxurious, a bed that looked softer than clouds, white curtains fluttering in the ocean breeze, a view of the endless dark sea stretching beyond the glass walls. But it wasn't the beauty that made me stop breathing. It was the painting. Propped against the far wall, half covered by a dusty sheet, was a large canvas. My throat tightened as I pulled the cloth away. It was me, sitting by the window of my father's workshop, sketching designs in my little notebook. The sunlight in the painting caught the curve of my cheek, the loose strands of hair falling over my face. I staggered back, clutching the edge of the bed for balance. I had never seen this before. How? When? Who had painted this? My mind spun, searching for answers that wouldn't come. I turned toward the door, ready to march downstairs and demand an explanation. But something else caught my eye. On the nightstand, sitting alone beneath the soft lamplight, was a small porcelain box. I reached for it with trembling fingers, lifting the lid. Inside, a key. And beneath it, a note written in the same familiar script that had haunted me since the plane. Sometimes, love begins where fear lives. I pressed the note to my chest, swallowing the lump in my throat. My mother's words felt closer now than ever before. But love didn't live here. Not on this island. Not in this glass fortress. Only fear. And yet, I couldn't stop my hand from curling around the key. I didn't know what it unlocked. I didn't know if I wanted to find out. But deep down, I knew I would. I don't know what possessed me to take the key. Maybe it was desperation, or the tiny voice inside me, my mother's voice, whispering to keep searching for a way out. Whatever it was, I slipped the porcelain box back into the drawer and closed it with shaking hands. For 2 days, I didn't see him. Meals arrived silently outside my door, delivered by a housekeeper named Mary, an older woman with kind eyes that didn't quite meet mine. She never spoke more than a quiet good morning or good evening. And when I asked her anything about Dominic, she only gave me the faintest of smiles, the kind that hid more than it revealed. I wandered the house alone, pressing my palm to the cold glass walls, staring out at the ocean that stretched like a living, breathing cage around me. The water was endless, dark and violent, mocking the hope I tried to hold on to. I tried every door, every hallway, every locked cabinet, until one night, I found it. The door at the far end of the east wing wasn't locked. My fingers trembled as I turned the handle and pushed it open. The air inside smelled faintly of oil paint and cedar. A studio. My breath caught as I stepped inside. Canvas after canvas lined the walls. All of me. Sketches of my hands sewing delicate lace. Paintings of me standing behind the counter of my father's shop. Even one of me in the park on a Sunday morning, feeding birds I couldn't remember ever noticing. I sank to my knees, my heart pounding. He had been watching me, long before this marriage, long before the deal. I pressed my hands to my mouth to keep from crying out. What kind of man studies someone like this and says nothing? The sound of rain pulled me back to my feet. I rushed to the window. A storm was brewing over the sea, lightning cracking across the sky, thunder rolling so deep it rattled the glass. And there, at the far edge of the property, I saw it. A small dock, a boat swaying in the waves. My heart leapt. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just ran. Down the stairs, through the hallways, out the back door into the wind and rain. My bare feet slipped on the wet stone as I raced toward the shore. I could barely see through the sheets of water, but I knew the path now, and my feet carried me faster than my mind could catch up. The boat rocked violently, tethered to the dock, by a single rope. I lunged for it and froze. He was there, Dominic, standing at the edge of the dock, soaked to the bone, hair plastered to his forehead, breathing hard like he'd been running too. For a moment, neither of us moved. The rain pounded between us like a wall. The wind howled, stealing the breath from my lungs. Then, he fell to his knees, right there on the slick, rain-soaked wood. I stared, unable to process what I was seeing. The man who hadn't shown me a single crack in his armor since the day I met him had dropped to his knees, his hands curled into fists at his sides, his chest heaving like every breath hurt. "Lila," he choked out, his voice raw, shredded by something I couldn't name. I shook my head, tears mixing with the rain. "You can't keep me here." His eyes squeezed shut. "I know." My throat burned. "Then why?" He looked up at me, and for the first time, he didn't look cold. He didn't look cruel. He looked broken. Because I didn't know how else to keep you. I swallowed hard, every word hitting me like a tidal wave. "I've watched you," he whispered, his voice cracking. "For years. Long before your father's debt. Long before this deal. I saw you. Your hands, your smile, the way you looked at the world like it still had something good left in it." His shoulders trembled, and I hated myself for wanting it, for wanting you. The wind howled louder, and I felt my knees begin to shake. "I thought if I made you mine this way, if I controlled it, I could stop needing you," he rasped. "But all I've done is ruin the only thing I ever wanted to protect." I took a step back, my heart splintering with every word. "I never wanted to hurt you, Lila," he whispered, the rain streaking down his face like tears. "I just didn't know how to let you go." My hands curled at my sides. "Let me go. Now," I whispered, my voice trembling but firm. He nodded slowly, swallowing hard like the words tasted like poison. "I will." I took another step back, turning toward the boat, every inch of me shaking with disbelief. But before I could climb in, I glanced back one last time. He hadn't moved. He was still on his knees, head bowed, as if surrendering to something neither of us could name. I turned away, but the image burned into my heart like a scar. I didn't leave. I wanted to. I told myself I would. But long after the storm had passed, I found myself standing on the balcony outside my room, barefoot and frozen, staring at the place where he had knelt in the rain. He hadn't followed me back. He hadn't come to claim me. And somehow, that was what scared me most. I should have taken the boat. I should have escaped while I had the chance. But the truth was, I didn't want to run anymore. Not because I trusted him, not because I forgave him, but because something inside me needed to understand the man who had looked so completely undone on that dock. I slipped back into the house just before dawn, the air thick with the scent of sea salt and damp stone. My skin prickled with cold as I wrapped my arms around myself and crept upstairs, heart pounding as I passed the darkened hallway leading to his wing. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. Not yet. Hours passed. Maybe more. I couldn't tell anymore. All I knew was the ache in my chest, the war raging inside me. And then I heard it. The softest knock at my door. My breath hitched. I sat up slowly, heart racing. I knew who it was before I even reached for the handle. My fingers trembled as I turned it, the door creaking softly open. Dominic stood there, barefoot, his shirt wrinkled, hair tousled like he hadn't slept all night. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The silence between us was heavier than anything words could carry. Slowly, cautiously, he stepped inside, leaving the door half open behind him. His jaw flexed like he was fighting himself. His hands curled into fists at his sides. But his eyes, they burned. Not with anger, not with possession, but with something far more dangerous. Need. He took a step closer, then stopped, as if waiting for permission. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. But I didn't move. I couldn't. He let out a slow, ragged breath, his voice breaking the silence like a confession. I never wanted to own you. I just didn't know how to let you go. Tears welled in my eyes before I could stop them. He took another step, reaching into his pocket. My breath caught when I saw it. The key. The very one I had hidden away, thinking he hadn't noticed. He held it out to me, his hand trembling. I knew you found it, he whispered. I left it for you. I stared at him, my throat tight. I thought, if I gave you a way out, you'd take it. I thought it would make it easier to let you go. I swallowed hard, my vision blurring. And when you didn't, he added, his voice barely audible, I realized, I don't want you to go. Not now. Not ever. The dam inside me broke. I reached for the key, but instead of taking it, my fingers wrapped around his hand, holding it tightly against my chest. He flinched, like the touch burned him. Why me? I choked out. Of all the women in your world, why me? His jaw clenched. His throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. Because you never belonged to that world, he whispered. And I never belonged to anything until I saw you. My breath trembled as I let go of his hand, stepping back just enough to feel the distance between us stretch like a thread about to snap. And then, without thinking, I whispered the words that had haunted me since the moment I saw him on that dock. Do I belong to you now? The question hung in the air like a dare. Dominic closed the distance in a single step, cupping my face with both hands, his thumbs trembling as they brushed away the tears I didn't realize had fallen. No, he breathed, his voice breaking. Not because of a deal, not because of fear. His forehead pressed gently against mine, but because you already took my heart. My breath hitched, my body trembling beneath his touch. He didn't kiss me. He didn't pull me closer. He just stood there, holding me like I was something precious, something fragile, something he wasn't sure he deserved to keep. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was locked in a gilded cage. I felt safe. Warm. Real. His hands dropped to his sides, his breath ragged. I'll leave if you want me to, he whispered. I swallowed hard, closing my eyes. No, I breathed. Stay. He let out a shaky breath, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from my cheek. I don't deserve you, Lila. I opened my eyes, meeting his gaze. Maybe, I whispered. But I think I want to find out who you really are. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just looked at me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. And in that moment, I almost believed it. Morning on the island was unlike any morning I had ever known. There were no city sounds, no hum of traffic or distant voices. Only the rhythmic crash of waves against the cliffs and the soft rustle of wind slipping through the pines. I stood at the balcony's edge, clutching the shawl Mary had left for me sometime in the early hours. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, wild and unyielding, as if it carried every secret I had yet to face. I hadn't slept. Neither had he. Dominic had stayed in the doorway until I drifted to sleep, sitting on the floor, his back against the frame, as if daring himself not to cross it. When I'd woken, he was gone, but something felt different now. The weight between us had shifted. I heard his footsteps before I turned to look. Slow, steady, careful. He stood in the doorway. Again, only this time his hands weren't clenched into fists. They hung loosely at his sides, like a man who had nothing left to hide. "Come with me," he said softly. I didn't hesitate. We walked through the halls in silence, my bare feet brushing against the cool stone floor as I followed him deeper into the heart of the house. He didn't rush. He didn't speak. He just walked ahead, like a man carrying something fragile. The stairs creaked softly beneath our weight as we climbed to the highest point of the house, a narrow spiral staircase that opened onto a small glass room perched like a lighthouse, at the very top. My breath caught when I saw the view. The island stretched out below us, wild and untamed. From here, I could see the winding trails through the trees, the rocky cliffs that guarded the shore, and the endless ocean that wrapped it all in a cocoon of blue and gray. Dominic moved to stand beside me, his hands sliding into his pockets. "I bought this island 5 years ago," he began, his voice almost too quiet to hear. "Not as an investment, not for development, but for you." I turned to face him, my breath catching. He kept his eyes on the horizon. "I saw you long before your father's debt. Long before the marriage contract," he continued. "You used to sit by the window of that little shop in the city, sketching dresses in a worn notebook. I don't even think you knew anyone was watching." My throat tightened. "I came back every week," he admitted, a faint smile ghosting his lips. "Not to buy anything, just to see you. To remind myself that not everything in my world had to be cold." I swallowed hard, my fingers curling around the edge of the railing. "When your father approached me about the debt, I knew it was wrong," he whispered, but all I could think was, maybe this was my only chance to bring you here, to give you a place where you'd never have to look over your shoulder again. Tears stung my eyes, but I forced them back. I thought if I kept you here, you'd be safe, even if you hated me for it. I turned away, pressing my palm to the glass, staring out at the island with new eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Why hide all of this?" He let out a breath, stepping closer until I could feel the heat of him at my back. "Because I didn't want you to think I was the monster everyone says I am," he whispered. "But the truth is, maybe I am." I turned slowly, meeting his gaze. "I don't know who you are," I whispered. "I don't know what any of this means." He nodded, his throat bobbing as he swallowed hard. "But I want to," I added, softly. His eyes flickered, like a man who'd been drowning for too long and had just found the surface. "I can show you," he whispered. "If you let me." I bit my lip, fighting the storm inside me. "Start by telling me the truth," I whispered. He nodded again, stepping back and gesturing toward the spiral staircase. "There's something you need to hear." We made our way back down, the silence between us heavy with something I couldn't name. He led me to the kitchen, where Mary stood at the stove, her hands trembling slightly as she stirred a pot of tea. She turned when she heard us, her eyes softening. "Mary," Dominic said quietly. Tell her. Mary set the spoon down, drying her hands on her apron. She looked at me, then at Dominic, and nodded slowly. I knew your mother, she said, her voice cracking with age. Long before she married your father. My breath hitched. She worked for the Hayes family as a housekeeper. Dominic was just a boy when she left, but he never forgot her. I stared at her, my knees threatening to give way. She used to sing to him in the kitchen, Mary continued, tears pooling in her eyes. She told him stories about honor, about love, the same way she must have told them to you. My chest tightened. Dominic's hand reached for mine, trembling as it hovered just inches away. I didn't just find you by accident, Lila, he whispered. I think I've been trying to find my way back to her, through you, for a very long time. Tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them. And in that moment, I didn't run. I reached for his hand, lacing my fingers with his, for the first time. We stayed in the kitchen long after the tea had gone cold. Neither of us spoke again, not really. Dominic sat across from me, fingers tangled loosely with mine on the table between us, like he was afraid to let go in case I vanished if he blinked. Mary, bless her heart, had quietly left us alone, slipping out with a knowing glance that carried both sorrow and hope. But as the morning stretched into afternoon, the weight of it all pressed heavier on my chest. I couldn't stay here. Not like this. Not when I still didn't know if what we had, what this was, could ever be real. Love wasn't something you trapped in a cage, no matter how pretty the view or how soft the hands that held it. I stood, my chair scraping softly against the floor. Dominic's hand tightened around mine instinctively, his breath catching. Lila. I shook my head gently. I need air. He didn't stop me. Didn't follow. I walked back to the shoreline alone, the waves crashing softly against the rocks, the sea stretching endlessly toward the horizon. I sat on the edge of the dock where he had knelt days before, hugging my knees to my chest. The wind whispered through my hair, but it carried no answers. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the sun to begin dipping low in the sky, painting the water in shades of gold and violet. Long enough to hear the distant hum of an engine roaring to life near the airstrip. I turned sharply. The plane. I stood, heart pounding. He was letting me go. I ran, feet pounding against the wet earth, the salty air burning my lungs as I reached the edge of the property. There, parked by the small private runway, was the same silver jet that had brought me here. Its engines were humming softly, ready to leave. My breath hitched when I saw him. Dominic stood by the open cabin door, a small bag at his feet. His back was to me, shoulders tense, head bowed. He wasn't preparing to board. He was waiting. I took a shaky step closer, every inch of me trembling. That's when I heard it. His voice, rough and broken, carried through the headset clutched in his hand. Let her go, he whispered into the microphone, even if it means losing myself. I pressed a hand to my mouth, a sob catching in my throat. He wasn't planning to leave. He was giving me the choice. He turned slightly, like he could feel me there. His eyes locked on mine, pain etched into every line of his face. I shook my head, tears spilling freely now. I thought you said you'd never let me go, I choked out. His lips parted, but no sound came out. He took a step toward me, stopping just short of reaching my hand. I don't want to, he whispered, voice raw. But I can't keep you if it means breaking you. I swallowed hard, every part of me screaming to run to him, to let him wrap me in the arms I had spent so long resisting. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not until I knew if this choice was truly mine. My hand slipped into my pocket, curling around the cold metal of my mother's ring. I turned it over and over in my palm, grounding myself in the memory of her voice. Let love be the risk you take. I looked back at the jet, the stairs waiting like open arms, then at him. The man who had let down every wall, every shield, and was standing here, ready to lose everything, because I asked him to. My heart cracked open as I closed the distance between us, standing so close I could feel the heat of his breath. You bought this island to keep me, I whispered. You let me believe I had no choice. He nodded, swallowing hard. But you just gave me the only thing I ever wanted. His throat bobbed. And what's that? I reached up, placing my palm over his heart, feeling the steady thrum beneath my fingers. A way out, I breathed. And the choice to stay. His breath caught. I took his hand, placing my mother's ring in his palm, curling his fingers around it. You told me once this island was always mine, I whispered. So let me come home to it on my own. Tears filled his eyes, his body trembling. You already have, he choked out. He cupped my face with shaking hands, his forehead pressing to mine, a breathless sob breaking between us. Stay with me, Lila. I closed my eyes, tears slipping down my cheeks. I'm already here. His arms wrapped around me, holding me so tightly I could feel the pieces of us mending in the space between our hearts. And for the first time, I felt free. I don't remember how long we stood there, pressed together on that runway, both of us trembling, as if the smallest breath might break whatever fragile thing had begun to take shape between us. The jet's engines whirred softly in the background, a quiet reminder that I could still walk away, that the choice was still mine. But standing there in his arms, feeling the raw, unguarded beat of his heart against my cheek, I realized something I hadn't dared admit before. I didn't want to leave. Not because I had no way out, but because I had finally found the courage to stay. He loosened his grip just enough to look at me, his hands framing my face like I was something precious. His eyes, so often cold and unreadable, now shimmered with something far more dangerous than possession. Hope. I meant what I said, Dominic whispered, his voice rough like gravel in his throat. You can still go. You don't owe me anything. I swallowed hard, my fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt, gripping it like an anchor. I know, I whispered back. I stepped away, just enough to place the ring, my mother's ring, back into his palm. I closed his fingers around it, holding them there for a moment longer than I should have. Keep this, I whispered. Not as payment, not as proof. He looked at me, breath held tight in his throat. But as a promise, I finished, my voice trembling, that whatever happens next, it's because I choose it. His breath hitched, his jaw tightening like he was trying to hold back the breaking. Lila. I reached up, brushing my fingers along his jaw, memorizing every sharp line, every rough edge. I choose you, I whispered. Not the deal. Not the island. You. His knees buckled like my words knocked the air clean, out of him. I caught his shoulders as he sank to the ground in front of me, just like he had that night on the dock. But this time, he didn't fall apart. He reached for my hands, bringing them to his lips, pressing soft, shaking kisses to my knuckles. His voice cracked as he whispered, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you. I knelt with him, tears slipping silently down my cheeks. Maybe not, I whispered, but I don't think love waits for us to be worthy. I think it finds us in the mess, in the breaking. His forehead pressed to mine again, breathless and trembling. I've never known anything real, he whispered. Not until you. We stayed there, two souls stitched back together by choices neither of us saw coming. I leaned into him, resting my head on his shoulder, breathing in the scent of salt and rain that clung to him like a second skin. He pulled me to my feet slowly, guiding me back toward the house with fingers laced tightly in mine, like if he let go, I might disappear. But I wasn't running anymore. Not from him, not from this. The island didn't feel like a cage anymore. It felt like home. The door creaked softly as we stepped inside. The air was warmer now, softer somehow, like the walls themselves had released the breath they'd been holding since I arrived. Dominic paused in the hallway, turning to face me with eyes that searched mine like he was still afraid this was all, some fragile dream. "Can I show you something?" he asked quietly. I nodded. He led me down a corridor I hadn't explored before, stopping in front of a set of double doors. He hesitated for just a moment before pushing them open. I gasped softly. It was a workshop. Wood shavings scattered the floor like snow. Rolls of fabric lined the walls. A sewing machine sat in the center of the room, surrounded by sketchbooks and pencils, all untouched, but waiting for me. My knees threatened to give way as I stepped inside, running my fingers over the worn wooden table that reminded me so much of my father's old workbench back home. Dominic stood in the doorway, watching me like a man terrified to hope. "I had it built for you," he whispered. I thought maybe one day, if you ever wanted to stay, you'd need a place that felt like yours." Tears blurred my vision as I turned to face him, my heart breaking open all over again. "It's perfect," I choked out. "You are perfect." He crossed the room in 2 long strides, gathering me into his arms like he couldn't bear another second of distance. His lips found mine, not with hunger, not with urgency, but with something far more devastating. Reverence. I melted into him, my arms wrapping tightly around his neck, holding him like I never wanted to let go. Because I didn't. Not anymore. He pulled back just enough to press his forehead to mine, breathless and trembling. "I love you," he whispered, the words falling from his lips like a vow. "I've loved you longer than I can remember." A sob broke free from my throat as I whispered back, "And I'm ready to love you now." His arms tightened around me, holding me to his chest like I was something he never thought he'd deserve but had been given anyway. And in that moment, under the soft glow of that little workshop, I knew. I wasn't trapped. I was home. Morning on the island had never felt softer. The storm had passed, leaving the air crisp, cool, and strangely still, as if the island itself had exhaled after holding its breath for too long. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, tracing my fingers over the worn rim of the porcelain teacup Mary had set out before slipping away to give us space. Dominic stood across from me, sleeves rolled up to his forearms, shirt untucked for once, as though he too had finally let go of some invisible weight. He was fumbling with the tea kettle like he'd never done it before, and maybe he hadn't. Maybe for all his money, all his power, this was the first time he'd ever stood in a kitchen, with nothing to prove, no one to impress, just us. I leaned against the counter, watching him with something I hadn't let myself feel before. Peace. The water boiled softly, filling the room with the familiar hiss of steam. He turned, carefully pouring the tea into 2 cups, his hands only shaking a little this time. He slid, one toward me across the counter, then leaned on his elbows, eyes never leaving mine. "I was afraid," he admitted quietly, breaking the silence, "that if I gave you space, you'd run. That if I let you choose, you wouldn't choose me." I reached for the cup, wrapping my fingers around the warmth. And I was afraid you'd never let me. He flinched, as if the truth still burned. I didn't know how to love you the right way. I let out a shaky breath, the steam curling between us. And I didn't know how to trust you enough to try. He swallowed hard, his eyes dropping to the table. But here we are, I whispered. He looked up, breath hitching. Here we are, he echoed softly. I set the cup down and reached for the chain around my neck, gently pulling the small silver ring free. I had worn it on that chain since the day I arrived, afraid to lose it, afraid to let it mean something new, but now I slipped it off, held it in my palm for just a moment longer, then reached across the table. Dominic's breath caught as I took his hand and slid the ring onto his pinky finger, the only one it would fit. He stared at it like it weighed 1,000 pounds. It's not a cage, I whispered. It's a key. He closed his hand around mine, lifting it to his lips. His kiss was feather-light, reverent. And you're not a prisoner, he whispered back. You never were. I smiled through the burn in my throat. No, I'm not. We stood slowly, like the air itself had thickened with something we couldn't bear to break. I walked around the counter, and he met me halfway, wrapping his arms around me with a gentleness that felt brand new. I don't want this to be just your island anymore, I whispered against his chest. I want it to be ours. His body trembled as he held me tighter, pressing his lips to the top of my head. It already is, he breathed. We spent the rest of the morning in the workshop side by side. I sketched while he watched, not saying much, just tracing slow, thoughtful circles on my back with his fingers. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to fill the silence. It felt like home, soft, steady, real. That afternoon, we stood on the balcony, watching the sun dip low, the sky painted in strokes of amber and lavender. The sea stretched endlessly before us, but it didn't feel like a barrier anymore. It felt like freedom. He slipped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. I leaned into him, closing my eyes as the wind played with my hair. I spent so long trying to build walls, he whispered, thinking they'd protect me from losing anything else. I reached up, threading my fingers through his. And I spent so long believing love was something people like us couldn't afford, I whispered back. His lips brushed the shell of my ear, soft and trembling. Do you still believe that? I turned in his arms, looking up at him, memorizing every line, every crack in the armor he'd spent years hiding behind. No, I breathed. Not anymore. He cupped my face with both hands, pressing his forehead to mine. Stay with me. Lila, he whispered, voice breaking. I smiled, tears slipping down my cheeks. I already did. He kissed me then, slow and steady, like he wasn't in a rush to own me, but finally learning how to hold me. When we broke apart, I rested my hands on his chest, feeling the steady, grounding beat beneath my palms. We both have no way out anymore, I whispered softly, smiling through my tears. But I wouldn't want it any other way. His breath caught, his arms tightening around me like he never wanted to let go. Mine forever, he whispered against my lips. And as the last light of day wrapped us in gold, I knew, without a shadow of doubt, that I had finally come home. Not to the island, not to the house, but to him. And for the first time in my life, I had no reason to run. If you felt even a little tug at your heart while listening to this story, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to hear more journeys of love, redemption, and second chances, make sure to subscribe to the channel. There's always another story waiting, and we'd love to have you right here when it begins.